If I were to say, I'm resilient, displaced but not defeated, my mental health, unstable and depleted, grateful to epitomize Black excellence, yet saddened by the collateral damage, stuck in limbo questioning what is heavier, the degree or the crown? You'd probably say, oh, it's just a poem about something. Yeah, it's whatever. Yet, it's more than just a poem. Yet, academically, if I were to say, Black students are far more likely to experience racial discrimination than their non-Black peers. And those enrolled at less diverse institutions reported experiencing discrimination more often. Or, if I were to say that 1 in 4 Black employees have experienced racial discrimination due to their race, based on a study from 2021 performed by Gallup. You'd probably raise an eyebrow, which some of you did, I saw that. You probably may tilt your head a little bit, maybe even a little confused. You might even disagree. And maybe you might even try to justify why these things are not true, or just can't be real. And that's the issue. But before we dive deeper, I want to take a step back. You see, Las Vegas is my home. I was born in the late 1900s, as my nephew likes to remind me. I grew up on the corner of Martin Luther King Boulevard and Cary Avenue. What kept me out of trouble and kept me alive was poetry and my education. Through witnessing hardships, trials, and tribulations in my community, my grandmother would sit me down, pray, and give me something to read, usually a poem. My grandmother, she would tell me to read the poem and reminded me that knowledge would always be my greatest weapon in a world that didn't see, appreciate, or love my Blackness. I was raised in a neighborhood where many Black men loved wearing the color blue and were usually harassed by white men wearing the same color who were paid to wear that same color. When this happened, my grandmother would sit me down, pray, and give me something to read, usually a poem. She'd tell me to read the poem and told me that while the world may not be ready to receive my gifts, it is important to not shrink myself in darkness at the expense of another's comfort. I was raised in a neighborhood where we would go to the candy lady and get 25-cent suckers. We would go to Carrie's Market and get dollar ices. We would go to Mario's neighborhood market and grab a catfish and hot link plate. To us who lived here, this was our home, this was paradise. And yet to outsiders, we were viewed as walking statistics, pending chalk outlines, and were valued at even less than 3/5 of a person. When this happened, my grandmother would sit me down, pray, and give me something to read, usually a poem. She'd tell me to read the poem and told me that my ancestors sent me here for a reason. As much as I wasn't the biggest fan of school, I grew fond of learning new things, and poetry became a popular outlet. I became so infatuated with learning, ironically, I became an educator. I've been an educator for well over a decade now, and one of the many topics I've spoken about, written about, and researched are the ways in which we approach and discuss Blackness, Black identity, and Black experiences. There are plenty of Black geniuses who have already invested much into these topics. And yet what pains me is how often people still talk about Blackness with a deficit-oriented mindset. Examples of that include, Kevin, why are we still talking about racism even though we've had a Black president? Why do historically Black colleges and universities still exist if anyone can go to college? Or quite frankly, Kevin, what is still the point of Black History Month? These questions have been answered by many who came before us. Langston Hughes, for example, first of all, once said, "Yet you say we're fighting for democracy, then why don't democracy include me? I ask you this question because I want to know how long I still got to keep fighting Hitler and Jim Crow." Zora Neale Hurston, beloved, she once said, "The terrible struggle that made me an American out of a potential slave said, on the line. The Reconstruction said, get set. And the generation before said, go. I am off to a flying start, and I must not halt in the stretch to look behind and weep. Slavery is the price I paid for civilization, and the choice was not with me." You see, The nuances of blackness and black experiences have been mentioned several times for more than a century, yet we're understood, acknowledged, or heard to the fullest potential. As an educator, I navigate through systems where for the lived experiences of my community to be believed and honored, it has to be backed by data, and usually disseminated through some type of academic publication. I once published a book chapter in 2022 and said, as long as acts of injustice continue to exist in society, activism will continue to oppose those systems that seek to further disenfranchise people within the African diaspora. This is no different than when Maya Angelou once said, "You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air, I'll rise." I once said in another publication from 2023, as an Afro-Indigenous scholar, activist, and servant leader, I seek to be an advocate for the historically marginalized, speak the language of the unheard, and contribute to the liberation for all people of color. Which is no different than when Lucille Clifton once said, "Here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand, come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed." Poetry was created as a means for people to preserve history, share culture, tell stories, and inform the masses of what's going on in our world. Yet some people believe those things can only happen at a secondary school or college with the execution of a long and complicated lecture. So here I am, expected to navigate poetry and pedagogy as two separate roads. And yet, I'm fortunate to have helped students understand the nuances of blackness and black identity through the works of Miss A.V., Dr. Javon Johnson, and Nikki Grimes. I have supported students to learn about intersectionality, black resistance, and black joy due to the rhythm and rhyme of Poetic V, the one and only Zeke, and Elizabeth Acevedo. I have empowered learners to recall pertinent information about black advocacy and black liberation through the stanzas spoken by Petite Monster, L. Hope, and James Baldwin. Instead of giving a complex lecture with key dates and terms, I have used poetry to debunk stereotypes, to help students develop a critical lens, and to identify their responsibility to disrupt anti-blackness. When assessing a student's learning, I don't always need to use quizzes and exams and rather have had more experience and more success through the use of free verse, prose, and personal stories. This approach to education has helped me amplify black voices on college campuses, advocate for their safety and well-being, and create spaces that center their joy and culture. Instead of over-intellectualizing black experiences, I strive to create opportunities where knowledge can be accessible. Now, don't get it twisted. This is not to say that scholarship through research, book chapters, and journal articles is unnecessary. Rather, it is to ensure that when we talk about creating scholarship, poetry is included in the conversation. While the expectation of me has been to separate poetry from pedagogy, I have chosen not to follow that directive and instead have thrived at the intersection of them. Poetry is passion. Poetry is purpose. Poetry is intellect. Poetry is resistance. The way I've seen students move, think, and act is sometimes poetry in motion, creating a masterpiece in the cadence of iambic pentameter. When it comes to my community, whether I say, academically speaking, normalizing the absurd signifies that historically white institutions have been complacent, masking their lack of action, care, or service at the expense of upholding a culture that does not truly serve black students, staff, and faculty on its campus. Or if I were to poetically say, while contradictory and made no sense to me, my curiosity about my descendancy increased my inquiries in having conversations delicately to uncover legacy of survival and resiliency that blessed my ancestry to be free and to eventually have me. Nothing changes the fact that black experiences are real. and poetry transcends beyond the confines of a classroom. I have taught social justice through a sonnet, history and hope through a haiku, and love through a limerick. I have taught power through prose, freedom through free verse, and blackness through a ballad. Poetry is not separate from pedagogy. Poetry is pedagogy. Thank you.